This episode of the Linux Action Show is brought to you by the good-looking folks at GoDaddy.com. Use our code Linux and save yourself some cash. And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 19, Episode 2, recorded and released on October 23rd, that's a Sunday, and live from a rainy Pacific Northwest. My name is Chris.
And from sunny Toronto, my name is Alan.
Hey there, Alan. Welcome back to the Linux Action Show. Alan, you've got to check out my Runs Linux this week. It is the awesome, because if you're ready for this, 2012 Cadillacs will run Linux. I'm not kidding here. Yep. Check this bad boy out. Now, I am more specifically talking about the Cadillac Entertainment System, and Autoblog has a pretty good post up here where they show this Linux-based embedded system that Cadillac claims will be 3 times faster than previous in-car entertainment systems. It has integration with Pandora. It also has something kind of crazy, customizable, themable dashboards per individual driver. So, like, the wife and the husband can have their own different style of dashboard.
Well, that's the kind of thing you're looking for if you're buying a Cadillac, right?
I guess so, man. I guess so. They actually spend quite a bit of time in this video they have talking about how awesome the different themable dashboard is for user profiles. But what was really cool is that it's all an ARM-based Linux on the back end with...
That's what I was wondering, what processor architecture they would use.
Yeah. They say it's ARM 11, which I guess doesn't necessarily mean that's like a more advanced ARM. In fact, ARM 11 could theoretically be a little bit older of a design. Cadillac's maintaining that they get a bunch of performance out of this thing. So, we'll see. It's kind of interesting. Well, good morning, Alan. How are you doing today?
Pretty good.
We had ourselves a busy week over at Jupiter Broadcasting. 2 days ago, Alan and I released the Tech Snap where we covered ZFS. Now, I know a lot of you out there have written in and asked us to talk about ZFS. It's not technically really a Linux technology at this point. I mean, there's ways to do it and some user land file systems and things like that. But on TechSnap episode, 28, Alan? Is that what we just did?
28.
28, we really just dove into gave you a great overview of ZFS. And Alan, you just tore through that sucker. So
it's a lot of features to cover. And we only really got to talk about some of the features and a little bit about use cases. We didn't even get into actually building anything or anything.
No, I know. But it's been a topic that's been requested that we cover a lot, so we wanted to cram it in there. And that's what this whole episode of the Linux Action Show is about, is topics that you guys have wanted us to follow up on. We've also made a couple of boo-boos, mainly myself, in the last few episodes, and I wanted to go over those, correct those, incorporate some of your feedback, maybe even play some voicemail in this episode. So things like, in our Ubuntu review, I might have got a little thing wrong, maybe 1 or 2 things wrong. I want to tell you about those, get those fixed up. And then later in the show, before we get to all of that, we've got a cramming news docket this week. Tons of great stuff we're going to cover. And really, some pretty interesting things out of Google this week, and we'll cram a few of those in there and cover the open source angle on all of those. But before we get to all of that, we have to talk to the good-looking folks over at GoDaddy, like Miss Danica Patrick.
Yes.
Patrick, Alan. Danica Patrick. And the web-savvy Danica Patrick knows all about GoDaddy.com, the world's #1 domain name and registrar. And GoDaddy has a special promotion for Linux Action Show viewers and listeners this week. Oh, yes. I said very special. Very special. So here it is. Catch it quick while it's still available. If you use the code Linux12, and we've got a link in the show notes where you can just jump right there, this applies to their website builder application. And this thing is actually pretty cool.
It is.
Think about this, and here's where you would use it now. It depends on the scale of your site, but the website builder will let you throw together sort of like a professional templated site that you can then customize and modify to your own benefit. And where something like this, even if you've got web skills and you've got the elite CSS knowledge and all that kind of stuff, what I actually think this can be pretty beneficial is if you have a client who just needs a pretty simple website, you could contract with them, bang out a website like this for a couple of $100, and really on your own, you're putting together on the back end a pretty easy site for you to get together and put and sell, but also an easy site for once you hand it off to the client to continue to manage. And that's actually where this code probably be really beneficial to some of the Linux Action Show viewers out there who want to make a couple extra bucks for the holiday season. So go use the code Linux12 and you'll save 20% off the website tonight plans, if you go 12 months or longer on those. And that expires on November 15th. So you got a few weeks in there to earn those extra holiday dollars save those extra holiday dollars too if you just want to make something for yourself. So use the code Linux12 to take advantage of that. But if you're just checking out a GoDaddy like regular, use the code Linux to save 10%, or Use the code Linux20 and save 20% on hosting plans. There you go. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring this week's episode. If you throw something together, always send it in to us. We'd love to see it. Post it in the comments on the show page, and then we'll start featuring those. So let us know. I'm kind of curious to see what you guys could build with this website builder, what you could throw down. Now, another piece of little business for the network is we relaunched SciByte this week. Now, I know a lot of you out there are probably in passing familiarity with our show SciByte. It's been reformatted and retooled. I now host it with Heather, our local Jupiter Broadcasting scientist, and we've converted it to an entirely new format that's an audio with a once-a-month video release. If you're a commuter or you enjoy audio podcasts, this is one of the best new show releases we've done in a while here at Jupiter Broadcasting, right along with TechSnap. Yes. And I'm really proud of how it turned out. It is audio only for the most part, but we've embraced that format and added a few things to it to sort of take advantage of that. So it's not just kind of like a video castaway. It's its own unique thing that really turned into a great product. That's SciByte, and we relaunched with episode 17, and episode 18 will be coming out Wednesday morning over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. So go check out SciByte. I'm really pleased with it because it's kind of turned into a news format show. You know, here in the Linux Action Show, we get to cover a lot of the open source and Linux news, and now on TechSnap, we get to cover a lot of the general technology news and security news, and now on SciByte, we're covering the science news. Yes. Which is awesome. And there's also some other great formats that Heather has introduced for the weekly format that I really like. All right, Alan, we've got a ton of show going on. I've showed the Cadillac stuff. It's time for me to get into our picks this week. Now, we've got two picks we're doing this morning. I've got an awesome comic book pick and for the Android, and then I've got an awesome, let's say time waster for Linux. It's definitely a time waster. But let's start with the comic book reader, which is not time wasting at all. Oh no. And that's Marvel Comics. They've actually introduced the official Marvel Comics app for Android. And it's the whole full-blown store. You can read comic books, you can buy comic books. They also offer some free comics in their store, but the timing is pretty good because Marvel's doing this big relaunch, season 1 relaunch thing that they're doing. And it's a good time to sort of catch up on that. And this is a good way to do it, especially if you have like a tablet or something like that. So it's a free app.
The tablet would be bigger, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's a free app, and there's a good amount of free comics. So even if you don't want to buy any comics, you could score some of the Marvel free stuff using the free app. So go check that out. We have a link in the show notes for that.
Interesting. And on a related note, Amazon just announced the new markup language for the next set of Kindles. And it's HTML5 based, but with a bunch of their own proprietary extended tags. And they have a whole section on doing comic books for the Kindle.
Oh, really? Now that could be pretty compelling because the Kindle Fire.
Well, so this is the Amazon's ebook format, the actual file format. So very it's not necessarily proprietary to the Kindle, right?
Right. So other people could adopt.
You can have the Kindle app on an Android, right?
Yeah. And if it's mostly just being marked up with things like HTML5 and stuff like that, then in theory, other devices should have no problem implementing that. Well, we'll see, right?
Well, it's more that they have a lot of like proprietary tags, but XML is XML, so.
Right, yeah. So hopefully somebody could just read that, figure out what they do, and then implement it. Let's talk about the time waster. The Linux app pick this week is a game, and it got on my radar, because I'm always looking for a fun real-time strategy game that I can just kind of sit back and poke at. And Mega, of course they make me say it Glest. It's not Quest, Megaglass. Why do they have to say it like that? Anyways, this is an overhead RPG type game. And the reason why this got on my radar this week is it's free and it's for Linux, and that of course will always do it. But they joined up with what they're calling the Free Game Alliance in this last week. And it's 5 open source games that they're coming together to help promote open source games and the concept of open source free games. Because I think for most people that's kind of a novel concept that you could not only go get a game for free that's of high quality and has great gameplay, but you could actually modify it. And I think a lot of people are not too surprised when they hear there's an open office and an Abbey Word and a LibreOffice that they can modify, or even a web browser. But I think there's a lot of people out there that just don't consider it when they think of video games. And that's where the Free Game Alliance is coming through. They're joining PlaneShift, and they're also joining Rings of Roads, the Battle of West North, and Exotonic. And so I'm talking this week about Megaglass because it looks like it's A, one of the further along projects, and B, it also has an installer that you can just download on Linux, and then it pulls down all the dependencies and things you need and just automatically sets it up.
I remember one of the first games that I played with that had gone open source like this was OpenTTD, Transport Tycoon.
Yep.
I loved playing that game when I was a kid, and so And then I remember I had this modified version of it that had a bunch of bug fixes and enhancements.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was like this patcher you had to launch the game through that would like change the memory around while it was running to make these patches work. And eventually they're like, well, this is just impossible. Why don't we just rewrite the entire game from scratch? And they did.
Yeah.
And it works beautifully.
Yeah. So that's a secondary pick. OpenTDD, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've. I think we talked about it once in a gaming roundup episode, but
Probably,
we don't give it enough mention. So both links to that's Megaglass, not MegaQuest, and also the Marvel Comics Reader links are in the show notes, as well as thanks to Majo in our IRC chat room, who's rocking it right now, as well as Babble Warble says that the Megaglass is also in the Mint 11 repos if you just have Mint installed. Majo's keeping those lists up to date, so links to those are in the show notes if you want to cover. If you want to install any of the Android apps I've covered, which is, I always hear from people, they say, Chris, man, dude, thank you. And really, it's Majo. Thank Majo. He's keeping that list together. But I hear from people, they say, I get this new Android device, and I went to your list, and I just loaded it up full of apps, and now I'm rocking it. You can do the same. Also, that universal app pick list is a great pick list if you've just reloaded a Linux box and you want to have some fun. So go check that out.
For sure.
All right, Alan, let's do the news. Alan?
Yes.
The top story on the news docket. You like that? I'm all jazzed up this week.
You are.
The top story on the news docket for this week. Open source and Linux is good enough for the Department of Defense. Is it good enough for you? This is actually a true statement. The Department of Defense came out this week and said, open source, it's not just good, it's great. And they released a couple of different studies that said that the U.S. government should look into using open source to avoid vendor lock-in.
Yes. Well, they have, like we've talked about this with the military a little bit before. I think it was on TechSnap, though, where, the vendors purposely make their systems so that they're proprietary. And so when they go to add on to the system or, some other system needs to be compatible with it, they have to go back to the same vendor.
Right, yeah.
I think the example we cited was that in the second Iraq war, the U.S. Army had to work in a completely separate area from the U.S. Marines because their radios were not compatible with each other because they were from different vendors.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're like, well, the river cuts the country in half. So you guys take this side and we'll take this side. And this way we won't kill each other. And that is quite depressing.
Well, that's true. I know. It is kind of sad because it's our tax. Well, it's at least it's my tax dollars.
Yeah.
The U.S. Department of Defense said that the reason why they're releasing these studies is it seeks to help the U.S. government personnel and contractors implement open technology. And they go on to say that imagine if only one manufacturer were allowed to clean, fix, and modify and upgrade rifles. So they're using the context of guns here. They say the military often finds itself in this position with taxpayer-funded contractor-developed software. One contractor with a monopoly on the knowledge of military software systems and control of the software source code, which is just a security risk if you have one vendor that has all of that. So they're saying it's not just for stability and tax savings, but it's also for national security in a sense, because then you can't have one vendor who can be compromised.
Right, and not just that, is that when one vendor's developed all the systems for so many years, if you try to switch vendors to some other competing vendor, even if you're starting from scratch, they just don't have the knowledge that's built up over time on how the system works.
Right.
Or used to work or whatever. And whereas when it's open, it's possible to share that and learn from it and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Now let's talk.
And like we've talked before on last about the DoD's secure bootable live CD.
Yep.
And a couple other things. So yes, it's not the first time that they've talked about this.
No, and they've also been. I think it was I'm not sure if it was. I guess it was the NSA that was more directly involved with SE Linux.
Right.
But so that's not unusual for the federal government to have an interest in the security of open source software. So it's just great to see the Department of Defense saying no. We recommend you use open source, because I know that it's still sometimes a bit of a fight to get open source into some of these things, especially when the contractors that want to sell you the proprietary solution have all the right answers, right? And they don't,
And more importantly, those vendors have, marketing budgets where they go and take the decision maker out to lunch. And that kind of stuff still makes a big difference to a lot of people. And that's, a disadvantage to smaller vendors and to open source solutions.
Right. It definitely is. Now, there is a smaller vendor open source solution out there that is almost the epitome of a grassroots movement, and that's the Mint project. The Mint distribution is funded by donations, and they track all of that on their site, and they've released that information this last week. And one of the other things that they released in that announcement is the plans for Mint 11 to implement and adopt GNOME 3. Actually, Mint 12, I believe, because I'm already running Mint 11. It's GNOME 2.
Mint
so
12
Mint 12
will continue to support
Yeah.
a traditional GNOME 2 desktop.
and GNOME 3.2.
Yeah, so you'll have an option.
Now, how are they going to do this? Because my understanding was you couldn't run GNOME 2 and GNOME 3.2 side by side, so I'm wondering if the GNOME
Right.
2
I'm guessing during the install you pick one or the other.
or the GNOME 2 release will be a separate download, maybe like,
Oh, possibly.
yeah, that could be kind of interesting. But I'm really curious to see what they have to say. Oh, they say you can. See, now, my understanding was you couldn't because maybe that's just from my early trials on Ubuntu.
Under the understanding that some of the libraries, the shared like libxml.
Oh, I see.
are
So the
not
chat room's
compatible, so-
the chat room's clarifying what it is the Mint project will be using the Mate project, which is now a stable fork of GNOME 2 to sort of continue the GNOME 2 lineage as Mate,
Right.
and they're going to use Mate in Mint 12 along with GNOME 3.2. And I think that's pretty interesting because I think the Mint folks could make a pretty compelling GNOME 3.2 desktop. I really have some faith in what they're going to bring as far as making things a little more usable. But the option to still have GNOME 2, but get all of the other distro up to date, Mint's going to have a pretty compelling product here. And they're still rocketing
Yes.
up that DistroWatch chart.
And plus, the fact that the GNOME 2 project is going to continue as itself is also good for systems like BSD where you can't run GNOME 3 because they went and did some funny stuff with the hardware abstraction and so on.
Chat room, the Reaper924 says that they're still kind of in the deciding process on some of this stuff. So I think it's probably something to watch because Mint 11, usually after all the distros we review, at the end of the day, when I reload my box or my main HP system in my office, that's Mint 11. You know what I mean? So for me, it's kind of an important thing where they're going to go with it, and I'm on the fence myself. I really like Mint's. I really like, even though Mint isn't the biggest distro out there, doesn't have the most developers, doesn't have the most resources, they're saying, you know what? It's within our capability to take on doing both. And at the same time, you have Mint Debian Edition, which I know a ton of the viewers out there love. I hear about that all of the time. We've reviewed it on the show. It's great. You have the Mint with the alternative desktops out there. Wouldn't it be interesting if because of the rather large amounts of hate that Unity still seems to be getting, which honestly surprised me. I thought by now, with the improvements in 11.10, Unity would be a little better received.
Right, but
I'm still seeing a
11.10
ton
is
of
still
hate.
brand new, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
And, like you said when we reviewed it, 11.10 is what the first release of Unity in Ubuntu should have been.
True.
And so it's still not quite that. It still feels like that, .0 not quite ready for production.
And so wouldn't it be interesting if the blowback from that has a bunch of people jump over to Linux Mint, because you get pretty much everything you're familiar with, your stuff, your PPAs, it's all compatible. You can even load the Ubuntu Software Center, Ubuntu One, all that kind of stuff. It's like the perfect migration path to get you out of that. And by offering both desktops, Mint 12 is going to be compelling. Is going to be a compelling offering to a lot of Ubuntu users.
Right. It's the people that really want to stay with GNOME 2 or the people that want GNOME 3 instead of Unity.
Yeah.
And they can both have somewhere to go now.
So speaking of Ubuntu and the interesting times that this last week was Ubuntu's 7th birthday. It's just unbelievable. Ubuntu 4.10 came out in 2004. Ubuntu 7.10 was a Warty Warthog? I can't remember now, but I can't believe how long it's been. And if you're watching the video version here, we have a still of the old Ubuntu login manager. It's actually kind of classy. I kind of like it. Kind of miss the old login manager a little bit.
I'm trying to remember which was the first Ubuntu I ever
was
used.
Warty Warthog. It says here, it was Warty Warthog. And here's what I thought was great, is listen to the default applications that Warty Warthog shipped with 7 years ago. GNOME 2.8, GNOME 2.8, Firefox 0.9, OpenOffice 1.12, and Game, the Instant Messenger 1.0, which later became Pigeon. It wasn't even Pigeon at that point.
Yeah.
And then A floppy formatter, so you can format your floppy drive, because that was kind of challenging for new Linux users back in the day, was formatting their floppy drive, and it really was.
Yep. Someone in the chat room just asked what Wubi was, WUBI. It's a project on SourceForge that allows you to install Ubuntu from inside Windows. So while you're sitting at your Windows desktop, you can install Ubuntu without having to repartition. It actually installs it as a disk image on your regular NTFS drive, kind of like a virtual machine, but it adds it to your boot menu. So when you reboot your Windows machine, you can dual boot into Ubuntu, but you don't have to repartition your drive. And if you want to uninstall Ubuntu later, it's just delete that directory off your hard drive.
Right. No, it's
actually very simple if you want to just play around with dual booting without actually all the headaches or the risk of losing data.
It comes highly recommended. Windows Ubuntu installer, I believe is what it stands for.
Yep.
One last note on the 7-year mark here for Ubuntu is, of course, back then there was no graphical installer. It was only the ncurses install, and we have some screenshots of that here. For you people, I actually still use the alternative install fairly frequently, which still pretty much looks like this. It's my actual preferred install because you don't have to wait for the whole live environment to boot up. You can just get right down to BizNAS.
Right. So, that's one of the big changes in FreeBSD 9 that's coming, is the replacing sysinstall, which has been the standard installer since I started using it in 4.0, and I think before that even.
Yeah.
And it feels a little strange to be the
Are
new
they
installer.
going with is FreeBSD going with a GUI installer now?
No. The new one actually seems worse than the menus are not as pretty as the old one either.
What the heck?
More importantly, it allows you better disk configuration. Like you can do the new partition types like UFI and GPT and a bunch of other ones. And I think it allows you to create ZFS from boot time instead of having to do it manually. Or from install. And so it has a bunch of features. It's not quite as pretty looking.
It's just the usability factor isn't high on their priorities list for their installer, huh?
Right. It's just, there's fewer steps and it takes less time to install now, but it just seems the old one's still there. It's just
okay.
Because you use it a lot for post-install configuration and stuff. But
yeah, that's true. You do, don't you? Yeah, you can call it up pretty much at any time when you're configuring stuff. Why don't we talk about Android developers getting their ice cream sandwich soon, hopefully. Yes. Now, we don't have it yet, but Google has come out and said, yes, you will be receiving the Android 4.0 source code for ice cream sandwich. But, Alan, there was something kind of funny. You mentioned they're having some issues with kernel.org and the downtime that it had recently, weren't they?
So, specifically, about a little over a week ago, someone asked about the source code on the Google group, and they
for Gingerbread still, right?
No, for 4.0. Okay. And they were told no comment. And people interpreted that as meaning it wasn't going to come. And so there was all this rage about it. But then a couple days later, a different Android developer came on and said that the 4.0 source code will be released once that it's pushed out to devices. So like once they start, once devices that use 4.0 go on sale, by then we should have the source code.
I see. So when you start getting the updates on your Nexus phone.
Maybe before then, but basically they're not going to release the source code before the devices come out.
Are you excited? Because you got a stock Nexus phone, so you're going to get ice cream sandwich. Yeah, I gotta get. So I asked people out there if they had any success stories on where they'd sent their Android phones in to get them repaired. I can only
you
find.
Broke your screen, right?
Yeah, I cracked the LCD screen. Yeah, not even the glass on top of it, but the screen underneath. Everybody locally in my area is only repairing iPhones. They won't even take my Nexus.
Weird.
I know. So if you have a website, like an online service out there that you send an Android phone to get your screen fixed, email me, chris@jupiterbroadcasting.com. I want ice cream sandwich and my Nexus S is broken. Blah. So what it was...
Honestly, that seems a little backwards because normally you would think iPhones would only be repaired by official Apple stores or something.
Well, I think, I don't know. There's just a lot of them.
It just seems like to get the same screen components and stuff, Apple will be locking them down and hiding them. And
I think they can buy them right from the Chinese vendors that Apple buys them from. Probably. I don't know how that works exactly. I don't know if it's legit or not.
I think it's Foxconn, but yeah, I don't know.
So where I got confused with the whole Gingerbread thing is the Gingerbread source code has been unavailable while the kernel.org site was down, and then they wanted to move it off there because I guess the big pushes from the Android development community are actually weighing kind of heavily on the Linux source code, on the Linux.org or the kernel.org guys, so people trying to get the Linux source code. So it's kind of like we need to move it onto our own servers anyway. So Gingerbread's going to be temporarily unavailable still, but we're moving it.
Yeah, so what happened was Google, because of the amount of load that it would generate on kernel.org, and Google decided it wasn't fair to make the community-driven kernel.org have to support their source code. So they decided they were going to move the 2.3 source code to their own Git repository to take the load away from kernel.org.
Yeah, there you
go. Of course, just as they decided this, kernel.org got hacked and went down for quite an extended period of time. And so they weren't able to actually get their source code off of it to move it.
Yeah, we all remember that little outage.
Yeah, and so now they've completed that. So the 2.3 source code is once again available from Google.
Oh, it is now? Good, yay!
Yes, it's
Last time I checked was like on the 18th, and it wasn't available yet or something like that.
Right.
All right. Well, let's talk about something else that's not available quite yet. I mean, or the gingerbread stuff is, but ice cream sandwich isn't. Something else. It's like the domino effect in software development. When one thing slips, everything slips. Well, and that happened to OpenSUSE 12.1 this week. Of course, the release candidate slipped, and RC1 was due on the 18th of October. But unfortunately, they said, yeah, you know what? We're not quite ready yet. So the main release of OpenSUSE 12.1 has been pushed back just a little bit to from 3 days. So now it's going to be, so you'll be able to get your hands on the RC on November 16th. So, boy, that's more than, wow. Moved back 5 days for the public release of the RC. That's what it was, 5 days. So that's not bad. So November 2011, you'll be able to get your hands on the release candidate, probably for release in February, something like that. I don't know. I guess, these things happen. Delays happen. I had a few people write me that seemed a little upset about it. I think there's some anticipation for this release. I myself am like, I'm of the school, it's ready when it's ready. Don't rush it. But I got a few people like, you're going to talk about this, right? You're gonna cover this on the show, aren't you? I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, who really cares? I don't understand why you're upset, people. And this is probably a good chance to mention we have probably had, I don't know, 2 stories emailed me to this week a lot. The one that we got maybe a mountain's worth of email about was this Linux servers are busted and aren't going to work anymore, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we get to that, another story that got sent to me quite a bit from the gaming audience of the Linux Action Show is Desura is sort of a Steam competitor, and they have a Linux beta out now, and you can go and get they have to go sign up. So it's closed beta, but they have in the show notes you can find the link where you can try to sign up and get in the closed beta. And once you're in, like I said, it's kind of like Steam for Linux. You can browse their game library, and the ones that are compatible with Linux will download and install for you. And I don't know, I haven't tried it myself, but then, if you remember, came on the show a couple weeks ago and talked a little about the Humble Indie bundle, or Frozen Synapse bundle it was. He has a video how-to walk you through how to download it, install it on your distribution, and get it running. So I'll link to that in the show notes if you want to watch that. Maybe you can get in the beta and get your Linux gaming on with that thing. Yeah. I'm not sure, too. I don't know how the DRM works. I don't know if it locks it. So if you get a chance to kick the tires, let us know what you think, and let us know how the whole DRM thing works. So, like, for me, I'm a frequent reloader. Am I going to be screwed, or can I just download, like I could with Steam, the games anytime I want? So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. So go check that out. So it's Desura, DESURA.com, and then you can find the Linux beta there, or you can just grab the link in the show notes for that. All right.
And the other thing I was going to mention was when we were talking about OpenSUSE, FreeBSD 9's release candidate finally came out today. That was brand new today. It was supposed to come out in like August, but a couple of bugs set it back, and they had 3 betas instead of the regular 1 because they found more problems. And part of it was a wait for a fix from an upstream project. But
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So FreeBSD 9 release candidate 1 is finally out, so we're expecting the final release shortly.
Oh, and then you get that new fancy version of ZFS in there.
Yes.
I want. All right. Chat room informs me there A, is no DRM, which is awesome. And also, B, it sounds like a few of the folks that went and tried to get their beta got approved within a couple of days. So it might be a good time to jump on there. You might be able to get that stuff. Okay. All right. Okay. Alan, if I had a soundboard, I would play... you know what? I do have a soundboard. I'm playing the Price is Right fail because I got to tell you, this is one of those stories where you just kind of have to shake your head. And it got sent to me a lot. Now, remember, people, we do have reddit.com/r/Linux Action Show. The Linux Action Show subreddit, it's linked in the show notes. You can submit stories that way, and then you can vote on them. Now, that said, I appreciate everyone who sent this in. And I got tweets, I got Google+, I got emails, we got Reddited. Here's what's going on. An article came out this week on ZDNet, and from David Gowitz. I'm not sure how you pronounce the last name, just like I never am. And he summed it up like this. He has a new motto. For all of us who have lives, there's Windows. Why I've finally had it with Linux, and I'm moving back to Windows is the title of the article. I've highlighted a few moments. I will say I don't want to get into a name bashing and slandering of a person's character and things like that, but I did read a few things that kind of made me think he might be a little confused, and he might have been a little in over his head. And I'll go ahead and I'll read those. I'll cover those. He said, I've had it. This is him going on sort of now ranting, full-on ranting in the article. I've had it with the fact that this stuff doesn't work reliably. Oh, sure, when you work with Linux every hour of every day, it's all you do, all you love. If you've ever had a date since you grew that one facial hair, if you've never had any other responsibility in your entire life, then if you knew every bit of every undocumented piece of folklore, then fine, it might be for you. And you know that if you type that command line on, say, distro version 4.3, it will work. But it'll break miserably on version 4.3a because that version requires a completely different entire program packaged with a completely different package manager, and that command line sequence can be gotten to just right on an IRC channel at the right time of night, taken at the right time, talking in just the right kind of way to an incredibly self-absorbed loser who happens to know that you need to put the undocumented-im in front of the fourth parameter. And that's what he says.
I don't know what he's talking about.
No, it just kind of was all kind of strung together. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right, but it's like, where are you using undocumented commands in Red Hat Enterprise Linux?
Oh man, the chat room is funny. I love this. The chat room is on fire. So he kind of sums it all up. Going back to Windows now. I kind of wanted to touch on a couple of things because he opens up the article talking about how, in fact, I'll just read it for you. He says, because remember, he wanted to establish that he's an expert, and so it's okay that he's having these issues. He says, this is a rant, and he's angry and frustrated. And he goes on to say that he's pretty sophisticated. He knows what he's doing. He's worked with Linux code before, or kernel code is what he says. He's done development, and so he's not like a babe in the wool here. He's got experience with it, and I'm looking for the exact quote. Yeah, you've been on lockdown, the same. No, but I don't
know. Somewhere in there specifically, he says like, "Don't try to say I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm a kernel developer," or something like that, right?
Yeah, and it's like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with operating a server. If you're a programmer, you're not supposed to be pretending to be a sysadmin. It's a different job.
Well, that's true. That's true. And I thought, but okay, if he's
don't tell me I don't know how to sail a boat. I'm a lawyer.
If he's yeah, exactly. But if he's a kernel developer, then I could probably find some sort of a credit to him or something like that.
A little bit, sure.
So I did a little digging online to see kind of, what's this guy about? So here's what it is. David worked on a project called the Frontier Kernel. Okay. And I guess maybe I have a link in the show notes. This might be like a fork of the kernel for some specific usage. But what David's responsibility is he added some SQLite and MySQL port to this Frontier kernel. So that's how he's a kernel developer.
All he did was link in some existing libraries?
Yeah. And like I said, I don't want to disparage him, but
right.
And there is just such clear confusion in this article.
Some of his points are valid, but they're exaggerated to such a degree that they don't make any sense.
Well, the things that are valid is, here's what I kind of deconstructed based on analysis of what he was talking about, based on comments. He wanted to remotely manage his backup software. And he felt like, because the way he manages that on his Windows boxes is through VNC. And he felt like he needed to manage this same backup software on his Linux box, which is hosted at his ISP, using VNC.
Yeah, well, first of all, who uses a graphical user interface on a server? It's a massive waste of resources.
Especially for managing, it's like a CentOS 4.5 or something box. It's a CentOS box.
5.
And
if it's for something, then well, sure, that's like decade old.
to get the graphical environment that he could VNC into, he must have tried to add some sort of repo to get GNOME 3 on there because CentOS doesn't ship with GNOME 3 out of the box. And he was attempting to install GNOME 3 from what appears might be an Ubuntu repo onto CentOS.
Right.
Then once he had all the repos in there and stuff like that, and he had all kinds of errors, he performed a system update. And then that system update
Which would
made
be
his
with
machine
the
unbootable.
Yum package manager.
Yeah.
So if he somehow installed Aptitude on a CentOS box and installed a bunch of packages with it, well, yes, that's going to. I don't even know why anyone. It's like he was reading some tutorial he found
I
on
assumed
Google.
he used Yum and he just like took the repos and made them Yum. You know, took the URLs, but
the
he probably used
Ubuntu
Aptitude.
repos would be apt, right? They wouldn't be in RPM format.
No, I was just thinking maybe he took the Yum and just used the URLs from the Ubuntu ones and just pasted them with
It
the
just
structure.
wouldn't work because they wouldn't be.
No, they wouldn't
signed
accept it. You're right. So he must have tried to do Aptitude and then he did an update
or something
because there was new package versions on the Ubuntu repo because you're using CentOS, which has very old stable packages by design.
And then specifically the part that annoyed when he was talking about, if you're using version 4.3, and then when you switch to 4.3a, it's a different package manager. I don't know what distribution has ever changed its package manager.
He interchanges package manager. He must be kind of confused on what a package manager is because he tosses it around a lot. And here's what it is. And I don't think it's this David guy's fault. I blame Microsoft. And the reason why I blame Microsoft is because what I have watched happen in the last 14 years in the IT world is Microsoft has trivialized and minimized the role of the system administrator, has made them sort of a commodity. Microsoft has commoditized the network administrator through the Microsoft Certified Professionals program. And I don't mean to disparage anyone that is a Microsoft Certified Professional because that's just what the system is.
Of course, they've whittled down what that means quite a bit over the last 5
They have. And I think over the years, there's sort of become this expectation that anyone can drive a server. It's kind of like if you're a truck driver, you know, like you have a truck for a commuter, like say a Dodge 1500 Ram, and you drive that thing all around, and all of a sudden you think you could get in a semi truck that has, you know, a load on the back of it, and you could drive it somewhere, and you are sort of a little pissed off that some of the interworkings of how you shift and how you manage all that stuff isn't immediately available to you. And the fact that this truck isn't just like that truck, so when you Google how to do it and you get the directions on how to manage this truck, it doesn't exactly apply to your truck and you get pissed. And so you still try to bolt that stuff on even though you're not supposed to? I mean, he has this whole mindset that server administration should be easy. But these are professional tools by people who work their entire careers to become experts to use them. Are they hard to use? Yes, because they're supposed to be. Because they're servers. Because they run critical infrastructure for multi-billion-dollar companies. And you can't just have somebody who obviously has a tiny bit of expertise sit down and start using them. Oh, yes. Yep. Yes, David, I've read your Wikipedia. It looks like you've done a fantastic job editing that page together. I'm just not happening to buy most of it, and it's obviously that you're confused. Now, that's fine. We all get angry. We all make mistakes. We all say stupid stuff on the internet. I do it on a weekly basis right here on the Linux Action Show. But here's the difference. A lot of us are smart enough to realize that the fault is in ourselves and that we just aren't equipped properly to handle the situation. Those of us out there who don't realize that, those are the ones that make themselves embarrassed. And if I were ZDNet, I'd be a little embarrassed for running something like this. He's the do-it-yourself tech guy for ZDNet, and he has all these do-it-yourself guides out there for getting the best price on the iPhone. But you know what, David? You kind of strayed too far this time. Yep. I'm sorry, man. I've run Linux servers forever. I've run Windows servers forever. I have many clients I've used over the years that have deployed Windows Server, and I've had many clients over the years I've deployed Linux Server. And you know what? The reality is the Windows clients are still the ones that call me today. And the Linux clients, man, if all of my clients ran Linux, I'd have to quadruple my client load.
Yep.
Because the amount of work that it takes to manage a Windows system and a Windows Server, a Windows desktop, whatever it is inconceivably more time. As a contractor, which thankfully I'm finally getting out of the contracting business, but as a contractor, if Linux had taken off, it'd be a significantly harder job for me. And I'm not even BSing that. And the idea that somebody just thinks they can come along, remotely connect to some CentOS box, which is an enterprise-grade Linux distribution, which means it's even a little harder sometimes than the easier distros, and install a GUI remotely and manage a backup system remotely on a hosted system that their ISP is obviously incapable of even providing support for is ridiculous. In fact, their ISP is quoted as saying, "Man, we see more errors on this than we've ever seen. It's erroring out like crazy."
It's like, yeah, because printing the same error a bunch of times is, epic numbers of errors. I think he may be misquoting them. I'm not going to assume that his ISP is as incompetent as him.
Well, no, but his ISP is like, no, we don't update the CentOS boxes, which they don't.
Because it breaks them. It's like, well, the whole point of CentOS, the reason why on CentOS and Red Hat Enterprise Linux, they stick with old versions, like when you install like PHP, you get like 5.1 or something, or 5.0, rather than the newest, like 5.3, is because they purposely make it so that upgrades don't ever change anything. It's security updates only.
In the most point, when you have a hosted CentOS box where there's different options out there, but there's the packages where they run it, and he might have been on a VPS. If he was on like a shared host, this would be even funnier of a story, because then he's in there banging around on some sort of shared host, which is just even funnier. But when it's a dedicated box, a lot of times, like, Pier 1 will do this, and a lot of other hosting providers, you rent the rack space and the hardware, and they load the base OS, because obviously it's kind of hard to do that over the internet. And then they let it go. They give you the root password, and you maintain it. It's your responsibility to update. So if his ISP says, well, we don't ever install the updates, that's usually because it's the customer's responsibility in those types of agreements. It doesn't mean they don't ever do it. That guy took that to mean, well, nobody installs updates. That's the only way Linux can be used, because nobody ever updates. I mean, he just goes and makes these grand assumptions that what it is, it's this mindset out there that in order to manage a Linux box, you either have to be a wizard who's dedicated to it, or you have to be lucky. And all it is you just have to be an expert who does his research. And that's all it is.
Well, that's the other thing. You don't just go Google how to install VNC or something, right? You have to look for stuff that's specific to your distribution, whatever kind you're using.
Now, I guess that's probably where he fell down, right?
What some of the other Linuxes probably need is something like FreeBSD has in the handbook.
Yeah.
It's like 23 chapters, and it covers how to install a desktop manager, how to do this, how to do that, how to set up ZFS partitions, and all those things. Because on BSD, it's a little bit different than doing it on Linux. And so they cover specifically how to do it, and it's all in one place on the official website.
You nailed it. That really is one of the most legitimate parts to the issue he had here, was that
but it's CentOS, and they have that.
Yeah. Well, that's true. And he talks about reading Ubuntu. He references the sparse Ubuntu how-to wiki, which sometimes does have
obviously if it's CentOS, you shouldn't be using a Ubuntu wiki. It's not going to work.
Exactly. It's I don't know. I guess I would say to him, I do feel bad that the documentation was it was not written in a way that was able to help him lock into the issues that he needed. And I think FreeBSD's approach, where it's that single handbook, it's complete, it covers all kinds of things, I think that might have helped him in this scenario.
Yeah.
But
at some point, he was doing something that people never do, which is install a GUI on a remote CentOS box.
It's a whole different mindset for administrating a remote Linux or Unix system. It's a different, in Windows, you remote desktop in or you VNC, and it's always a graphical environment. Now, that's starting to change in the next version of Windows Server with the more things they're doing with PowerShell. And they've already introduced a version of Windows Server that doesn't have a GUI.
Right, the Windows Server
Core.
Basic or whatever.
Windows Server Core, yeah. But that's all down the road. And if you're kind of a long-time Windows administrator, in your mind, you go the GUI route. I think he was just deadlocked, and he didn't even realize he was on the wrong track to begin with.
Yep.
He just kind of made an assumption on how to get, instead of learning how to get the job done, he made an assumption on how the job gets done, and then the execution on how to get to that job is where he failed. I mean, it's not impossible to do VNC.
No.
I mean, he could have done like FreeNX and rocked it. That'd have been a little better, but unfortunately, because he's in a position just like we are to voice out our thoughts on the matter, that's what happened. Now, we've responded with our thoughts, and I got to tell you, our audience did too. I mean, the chat room is going crazy right now.
I think ZDNet got enough comments that they actually had one of their other authors post a follow-up called Linux servers work just fine.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again,
there are like hundreds of thousands of them.
I don't want to talk bad about somebody, but the author that Linux servers work just fine, I've seen a lot of good stuff from this guy over the years, and he's also a pretty big Windows administrator too. And a lot of people that work in the industry end up dealing with both operating systems or more.
Yeah.
And he goes on to talk about some of his experiences and how really, he comes down and kind of breaks down some of the mistakes he thinks the other author made and stuff like that. It's a good couple of reads back to back, that's for sure. And I'm glad ZDNet did post that follow-up, because sometimes ZDNet has a history of posting sort of Linux link bait stories that just kind of rile up the Linux community. And I kind of felt like that's what they were doing. Still kind of seems to be the case, but at least they have a pretty good follow-up to it by somebody who's pretty well versed on the subject. So
Because,
that's our thoughts on it.
You can have the same problem from the Windows side. Like, for example,
Oh, yeah.
if your Linux server, some component in the server dies, you can pull the hard drives out, put it in a different machine, and it'll boot up and it'll work. Mostly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Because
Like-
the kernel has the drivers for most
Yeah.
hardware already built in. Whereas
Yeah.
with Windows, you change a lot of that stuff, you're going to get a blue screen.
Yeah,
and there's
you
just
change
small.
anything and it will just not work. And it's like, it
That's
doesn't give you the option to install the different disk controller driver or the different,
That kind of sounds like an obscure go-to mention that you're making there, but the reality of that is when you're in a disaster and your server just took a huge stinky dump, the ability to pull those drives, like if it's a motherboard issue, to slide those drives out and slide them in another box and then hit the power button and have a 98% chance that thing's going to boot up is sort of a game changer, actually.
Yeah, well, it's happened to me. It was 3 or 4 years ago over the Father's Day weekend. I was off visiting my grandparents.
Go figure.
We had a big barbecue for my grandfather. And,
Go figure.
And then my phone starts ringing. Hey, our web server in Chicago has died. I was like, ah. So I call up the ISP and they're like, oh, we think it's a power supply. So they replace the power supply. So, oh, it's not. It's still not working. It would run for a couple of minutes and freeze. And so they quickly figured out that it was the CPU fan. But they didn't really have any spares left. Normally they keep spares for all the machines, but mine was a slightly older one, and they don't have many of those left. And so they had used up all the spares, and they never bought more, I guess. So anyway, after it was like, well, it would be like Tuesday or later before we could get a free another like a replacement CPU fan and everything in. And it's like, well, can you pull the drives out and stick it in a different machine? It's like, well, sure. And so I had the machine back up shortly after that. The only thing I had to change was the FS tab had to be updated slightly because different SATA port meant the device name was slightly different.
Right. Now, of course, the chat room's pointing out that if you have a customized kernel like on Gen 2, then you probably don't have a bunch of modules for your different drivers and you have a more lean set, and that's not going to work all the time. But for the most part, it does work, especially on more stock kernels.
Well, here's the big difference is that my change was from a Core 2 quad to an AMD machine. That's something you could never pull off on Windows.
Sure.
It's like if you're swapping the hardware out and it's like the same-ish motherboard or at least the same chipset, then you might be able to pull it off. But if you're changing processor architectures, there's no hope that that Southbridge chip is actually going to work.
No. Now, one story that we don't have in the news docket, but what's the web browser that you're a huge fan of? Or not web browser, I'm sorry, web server.
Nginx.
Did you see the news story that came out from the dudes that monitor sort of the usage of IIS Netcraft? They monitor the usage of IIS and Apache, and they're noticing a trend now that NGIX is about to overtake IIS as the and it's encroaching on Apache really quickly too.
Well, and part of that is that a lot of people now put Nginx in front of IIS or Apache because it accelerates them by itself.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, Nginx has had huge growth. It's also taken over a lot of the share that Light HTTPD had.
Sure. So you think maybe that might
active?
Do you think it might emerge as the ultimate web server at the end? Maybe even outsetting
not
Apache?
exactly. It's not as
featureful,
robust, but featureful as Apache.
Yeah.
So for like your regular shared hosting, like your plain old, host like 1 billion domain names,
just like
type
vhost
server,
and stuff?
Apache is still better. Because like out of the box, Nginx won't do PHP. Now,
Okay.
But you have to use fast CGI. And right, so there's a whole system for it, and it works fine. It's how Jupiter Broadcasting site runs.
Right.
There's no Apache at all involved in Jupiter Broadcasting, but
It works.
it's a lot more setup if you just want a quick web server.
I see.
But if you want to handle high load, it's a much better choice.
That's what it must be. As some of these as these sites just get more and more serious and larger, like I saw an Apache or I saw an NGIX error on Facebook the other day.
Yep.
Yes, I use Facebook sometimes. And so can you. Facebook.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. Get announcements when we're live and stuff right there. But yeah, the other day I went to load it and it was an NGIX error and I thought, oh boy, yeah, that is getting big. There you have it. All right, Alan. Well,
Facebook has driven a lot of development and all that stuff, right? Memcache.
they're
APC,
huge on. They've really pushed
Nginx,
NoSQL
Varnish.
forward, right?
Yep.
They're getting people
All
on more
this.
of a flat file database, or Cassandra, I think is what they call it, right? Cassandra.
Cassandra was
Is that not on Facebook?
Dig. Facebook. I don't know what they are exactly.
Wait, no, I
now,
think it
but
is Cassandra,
up till
'cause
recently,
I believe
Facebook
Dig
was almost all MySQL, and that was their issue. And
Dig
so they
went to
started moving.
Cassandra because Facebook successfully transitioned to Cassandra.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
But
what it is.
originally, Facebook was all MySQL, but they had to start changing because they just had,
Yeah. Yeah.
larger amount of data than MySQL
Of course,
was
that
ever meant.
didn't work out so great for Dig, did it? No. Oh, well. Facebook, they're saying in the chat room, is using CouchDB now, so maybe it didn't work out so good for them either. All
I'm
right.
using, Mongo for my NoSQL.
Mongo, huh? We've gotten off the beaten path, Alan. That's all the news for this week. Okay, Alan, it's time for us to get to some feedback. It's been a while since we've dedicated an episode to covering the stuff that we got wrong or the stuff that you want to tell us about, and that's what this episode is all about. And I probably feel like I should start at the very beginning, Alan, because it's a very good place to start, and that is last week's episode is our Ubuntu and Kubuntu 11.10 review, and I might have got a couple of things wrong. Now, to be fair,
So did I.
I think at one point what I said was true during the beta process, and then I didn't go back and check on it, and then I opened my mouth during the review and got it wrong. You see. So I will fess up to the first thing that I got wrong in our Ubuntu review, and I want to say thanks to Felix Albrecht on Google+, who left a comment on our show page to tell me all about it. And essentially, the main atrocity that I got wrong is I kind of got it on Canonical for not having Ubuntu 1 available as a storage destination for Deja Vu Backup, the backup application that comes bundled in the new Ubuntu. And I guess they've added that. It does actually have the option to back up to Ubuntu 1. So that makes sense. And see, I think there was something else I might have gotten wrong. I'll have to check the notes in the Ubuntu review.
In the Ubuntu Software Center, there's an option under File, and you can sync between computers to sync your installed application between different computers using Ubuntu 1.
That is sweet. I was saying I would love to see that. So
now, if you had your desktop and a laptop and you wanted to sync the apps between them, that'd be really handy.
Yeah, that's a really great feature. And as Ubuntu keeps adding more and more stuff like that that's integrated with Ubuntu 1, I'm telling you people, they're going to add a layer of convenience on top of Ubuntu that no other distro is going to offer. And this is going to be what Canonical is going to hedge Ubuntu's their competitive feature as. This is what they're gonna try to stack up against the other distros, is things like this. And honestly, syncing my installed apps between my machines, hells yes. Yes, please. ICANN has more.
If it works.
If it works, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. All right, moving on. Perhaps Sean might be in the chat room right now, but Jupiter Colony, Alan. It's a mess. And I'm not quite sure what to do with it. It gets a lot of spam. It's got some theme issues. Now we've got some mods in there who log in and clean it up all the time, but I'm just not sure. I'm seeking input basically on what community members think we ought to do to spruce up the colony. I mean, it still works. People can still leave, have discussions in there, but there's some spam that we have to clean up on a regular basis. It's kind of getting old. I'm just looking for what people want to see in the Jupiter Colony. We have show notes. We have a Reddit page for news. We have Facebook page for announcements, but not everybody uses that, so the colony could be some value there. But I guess I'm seeking for input, what they want to see us utilize the colony for, and if they want to see us just wipe it and start clean, or try. I don't really want to do that because we've got users in there from 2008 and stuff. I'd hate to kind of
and we just have, data posts and stuff.
Yeah, but I want to do something to kind of freshen it up and liven it up in there. So. I'm kind of taking different suggestions from the audience. Of course, the people who have been working on the forums the longest will kind of have first say in the matter, but leave a comment on this episode if you have any thoughts, or I guess probably we should start a thread in the Jupiter Colony. Alan, do you have any kind of ideas, suggestions? What do you think? Should we scrap the forum altogether?
I don't know.
Is that too drastic?
I don't use forums a lot, so I'm not a giant fan of them.
Well, there's only a small percentage of our audience that does, but the ones that do seem to use it pretty regularly.
Yep.
Yeah. See, Mr. Mango in the chat room is agreeing with you. He says people don't use forums as much. So
well, lots of people still do. It's just I've never liked forums, and that's just me. I came from the BBS days where I was more interested in the live discussion than the
Sure.
the archives or whatever. And so I naturally transitioned to IRC, and I've always been into that.
Right. Yep. I am. Let's talk about some. So leave us your suggestions, or you can email me, chris@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Now, another question that I've gotten on and off over the years is where can I find old episodes of the Linux Action Show? And that question was submitted to our Linux Action Show Reddit. And also, you guys, we have some cool, the subreddit over at reddit.com/r/Linux Action Show now has Debian and Fedora logos for the vote up and vote down. I'll let you guess which one is vote up and which one is vote down. And we've also got bling. You can put on your own bling. So like I have the Mint logo as my avatar bling. Anyways, he wanted to know where they can find really old episodes of Linux Action Show. And if you're curious as well, aside from the RSS feed, which does go back a few years, there also is 2 links in the comments section to archive.org, which really have the old stuff. I don't know, boy. Before we even had seasons, I think, stuff. We have like episode 2 through, 70 on that one, 80 on that one. And then there's a separate post where we have a whole nother set. So if you do want to get yourself some really old Linux Action Show, I've got 2 links in the comments to that question that will hook you up with that. All right. Now, Alan, you'd mentioned there's a couple things you wanted to correct. Do you want to get those off your chest now?
During the Ubuntu review, I mentioned how-to on how to revert to GNOME 2 in your Ubuntu, and it's actually not GNOME 2. It's just how to make the existing GNOME 3 look more like 2.
Yeah. In fact,
so I just want to be clear that you can't actually run GNOME 2. Although, if you want to, apparently Mint 12 is the answer.
Yeah, Mint 12 might be the way to go. But we will include a link in the show notes to sort of make that easier on you guys. 7 best GNOME shell extensions to install in Ubuntu 11.10 via PPA to make it, a little easier to use for GNOME 2 people, which includes things like a regular standardized menu, which I think, Alan, is kind of one of the things you were thinking of. And it, I don't know, just lets you go through and sort of set things back to a little bit more the way of GNOME 2 did them. And pretty easy, quick install. So not quite GNOME 2, but if you want to stick out GNOME 3 on Ubuntu 11.10 and you want to try some of these extensions to make it a little more like GNOME 2, that might not be a bad way to go. So yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, I've got another one for y'all.
Now, that one I noticed in your show notes, you kind of just transition without explaining.
What?
The next note you're about to make? In the show notes, it doesn't make sense. It just...
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
you randomly start talking about it without mentioning the name of the thing.
I'll update that. Yeah, because it's we're talking about VirtualBox. The VirtualBox episode that we did, 3 episodes ago now, counting this
Something
one.
Like that, yeah.
For the VirtualBox for pros and beginners. Now, I made the erroneous comment that there is a huge disparity between the VirtualBox open source edition and the VirtualBox closed source edition. What I was basing that off of is my practical experience in a server production environment with VirtualBox 3X, where that actually is the case. However, in 4X, I believe starting in 4X, or at least at some point in 4X, they have sort of simplified and streamlined. There's just one edition of VirtualBox now, so if you get it through your package manager on your distro, you're fine. And then there's extensions and plugins that you add on top of that then give it the functionality like the USB 2.0 or remote desktop protocol to the thingy, stuff like that. So I kind of got a little backwards. The overall break in between functionality is still there, but the way you get that
the same. They just... Yeah, it's not a separate download anymore.
Right.
It's a core with the plugins instead.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Alan, I have... Boy, the audience has busted you wide open, Alan. I hope you're ready for this. You are about to be called out on live internet audience. On the open thread I started on Reddit, we didn't get a lot of bites because I just posted it late last night. But here you go. This comes from user TechSnap with 2 Ps. He says... During the pre-show of TechSnap, maybe about 3 episodes ago, Alan admitted to not liking or wearing shirts with writing on them. In the most recent TechSnap, however, he's clearly wearing a shirt with writing on it.
I didn't say I didn't like shirts with writing on them. I don't like shirts with advertising for things I don't support on them.
That's right. You had a Jupiter Broadcasting shirt on, didn't you?
Yes.
Good man. Yeah,
for sure.
I know. I just thought that was hilarious.
And you might want to go check out the show notes for TechSnap. The most recent episode where I was wearing that shirt. It has coupon codes to get your own JB shirt, and the free shipping offer expires like today.
Oh, okay.
So
There you go.
you want to hurry up and get on that.
Yeah, totally.
They have free shipping internationally, even.
I just thought
So
it was.
It's
I thought that
not
was great.
U.S. only.
I just thought it was funny. People watching the pre-show on TechSnap, totally busting you.
Yep.
And I think, I think that's
I don't
probably.
remember saying that. I say that from time to time. I just don't remember actually saying that on
Right.
a live stream.
I think
Although that is, yes, apologies. Most of my shirts don't have writing on them. Now, I wouldn't say just writing, because almost all of my shirts are Think Geek shirts with lots of writing on them. It's
Right.
just I don't like with advertising.
Logos is probably what you said, huh? Or something? Yeah.
Something like that. But, only if I really support the thing, like Jupiter Broadcasting, which I do support.
I kind of like the idea of doing frequent feedback and follow-up episodes that covers different things, errata or whatever.
Like I know some podcasts do it like every 4 episodes or something, kind of like how you do once a month video with SciByte.
So maybe we should start doing that on a more regular basis here on the Linux Action Show, because I don't want to go too long and miss something that we should have corrected, but I also don't want to go back a year and cover stuff that doesn't really apply anymore. So I want to try to find the balance. Let us know if you like this. Honestly, we just usually avoid these kind of episodes because we're worried they're just a little boring.
Right. But you can make them less boring by sending in good questions.
Yeah. Oh, good point. In fact, let me see if I still have it open. Yeah. In fact, I'm even accepting voicemails. Here, I'll put up the, if you're watching the video version, I'll put the voicemail phone number up on the screen, but it's of course, it's US, so it's 1-425-533-2217 if you want to call and have your voicemail played on the show. In fact, Sean, a very long-time viewer, called and left his voicemail. Let's go ahead and play that now.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Alan. This is a long-time listener, Sean J. Goff. I'm just calling in to say you guys are doing an awesome job. Love you, Alan. The quality of the show is definitely more relevant to my interests. Keep on going. Look forward to seeing the next few shows. Bye.
Well, thank you, Sean. So, Sean, I wanted to play that because it's great to hear from longtime listeners. And Sean said, and I know you couldn't hear it on the Skype line, he said that he really likes his co-host, and he also really likes the quality of the show and the topics we're covering. Now, of course, we've heard the other direction too, and we're always making modifications to try to make everybody happy.
But if you want us to cover something, you have to tell us. We're not telepathic.
That's right. That's why the Reddit page is such a good way to go, and then obviously the voicemail is a great way to get your voice heard on the show. So let us know. You go ahead and leave in the comments too. I think we'll kind of plan maybe another 4 episodes, so maybe one more this season, maybe 2 feedback episodes a season. I think is what we do to kind of cover things, and then moving forward, we'll see how that works and see if you guys like it. All right, Alan. Well, that's the Linux Action Show's look at your feedback. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Alan, for joining me once more.
No problem.
And, of course, you can watch this show live on Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific. What time is that in your neck of the woods, Alan? 10 a.m. Don't you know?
1 p.m.
I was going to say, you have to do the show every week. Don't you know what time you start the show?
Yeah, I know the TechSnap one.
No, you know what?
Yeah,
it's
1 p.m.
hard. No, time math is effing hard, and that just
not.
proves it. It is hard, and you just proved it. So we're live at jblive.tv at 10 a.m. Pacific if you want to join us. And one last plea, go check out new SciByte episode 17. You guys, I'm just so damn excited about it. I can't stop talking about it, and I want to hear your thoughts. Plus, I want you to download it every single week because, hey, good, awesome science content fits right in with Linux Action Show, fits right in with TechSnap so perfectly. It's like it was meant to be some sort of beautiful Jupiter Broadcasting puzzle, and you're just the missing piece.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
It was.
I really like that. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next Sunday.